I'm going to make this one short. So the whole issue with Whoopi and the things that were said with regards to her getting herself in hot water because she said she didn't really see how this could be a racial issue, given that the Germans were white and the Jews were white. So she was like, I don't understand how can be a race issue. Now, in a way, she has a point, but I think her point is a little missed only because she didn't really understand what has happened with regards to what Hitler actually wrote. And I think the part of the thing that we have to do to understand what was going on with that, or what's going on with how we see things today, is we go back to the source. So one of the things that we should do as people who are being diligent to understand stuff, similar to the Bible, we go and we search and see what's the original source. That's what journalists are supposed to do, supposedly, right? So what I did is I went and got Mein Kampf on Internet Archives, and I went and looked through it, and I tried to find out the part where it mentions the Jews, and to try to get an understanding as to what the issue was with Hitler. If he had white skin and they had white skin, then what is the issue? So one of the things I found that came up, Mein Kampf here, and we're going to start here on the right side, guys, just because that's the 67 is the page on the right, and 414 is the page on the left. So it says, in the course of the centuries, their external appearance have become European and human. Yes, I even looked upon them as German, meaning I actually looked upon them as white. Because Hitler was about white master race thing. So he's basically saying that, look, if you guys may look white, but I understand that that's over the course of centuries. Now, what would be more controversial, and if I would love to see if one of these great scholars from these many universities and all these people who studied the Holocaust, you would think that since they're teaching about the Holocaust so much and you hear so much about it, you think that somebody would actually have read Mein Kampf and actually distilled down what the issue was that Hitler actually had with the people whom he called Jews. And the issue that he had was he did see them. He did see them as actually looking white, because he says in the course of the centuries, their external appearance had become European and human. Yes, I even looked upon them as Germans. Now, it's pretty hard to say you don't understand why Whoopi is confused, guys, because in Hitler's own writing, in Mein Kampf, it says in the course of centuries, their external appearance. Appearance meaning something that you can see, right? It appears that you're wearing all orange today, or it appears that your skin is white like mine. So it appears on the external appearance that you are European. On the external appearance, I see you to be human like me, because I see all humans as Europeans. Now, did Hitler say, well, you're specifically a German European? No. Hitler looked at it like, no, all Europeans, he's associating with what? White. Not meaning, oh, your facial characteristics, blah, blah, blah. No, he's saying Europeans as a group. And then he's saying the subgroup of Europeans that he's talking about, which he says is white, given that he's white power, is German. So he says, of the white people, from external appearance, the white people that are European, right? He says you look like you're one of the European groups. You look to be white. I even looked upon you specifically as what? White Germans. Like European white. So there's no question this is about what he saw, because he says in the course of the centuries, they're external. The outside, what I can see, what appears before me, I even looked upon, right? From the outside, I even looked upon you from your external appearance as being white, German. So guys, there's no question about that. But the thing that is interesting is he says in the course of the centuries, their external appearance had become. Now, the other thing you have to say, guys, just reading from this sentence, when you read something like this, you can look at it and you say to yourself, wait a minute, there's a lot said in this sentence. And, at first glance, you can kind of skip over it. But there's a lot said in this sentence, because what he's saying is in the course of centuries. That's at least 200 years. So think about it. Let me just look at it like this. We have painters out there. See, God is wonderful. So if you're a painter and you have some color that is two colors that are close to each other, does it take much paint to lighten up one paint to make it lighter to the other? That doesn't take very much paint, right? Meaning, if you're very close to the color of what Europeans look like, which she says are white, then it wouldn't take that long for you to start looking white if that's how you started out, because you're already close to white. So it wouldn't take centuries for you to start looking white. So then the question is, if it took centuries for their appearance to look white, that means they were far from looking white centuries ago. Because it wouldn't say in the course, as it says here, in the course of the centuries, 200 years, at least their appearance, external appearance, had become European and human, meaning to him, you were considered like what? Mongoloid, non-European, right? To him, not even a man, you're a beast. And so you were much darker, because that happened over centuries, at least 200 years, that your appearance had become European, that your appearance seemed to be white. In fact, he says, of all the Europeans, I even looked upon you as German Europeans. So white German Europeans. That's what Hitler is saying. And he's saying, but that happened over the course of centuries. So meaning, again, with the paint analogy, it doesn't take that long for somebody who's maybe a little darker to get, to look like Europeans. That's not going to take the course of centuries, guys. So this is problematic for the narrative that we have going on right now. This is do you understand how problematic this is? On top of that, just to verify what he's saying, he says Jews, he thought, because this is in page 67. And then it elaborates, and he's talking about, this is in the course of centuries, but he says, look, Jews were, he thought, a race mixed with other races, too diverse in character to permit assimilation. They had married with Arabs and Syrians. And as a result, these were degenerate. He's saying, due to this whole thing of mixing your blood, the sin of blood, you guys aren't really quote unquote white. You were much darker, and you only started to appear white because of centuries of what? Race mixing. Centuries of race mixing. Centuries of race mixing. And because the closer and closer and closer and closer you got to looking white, the more European you got to look, and the more I considered you to be a regular human being just like me. In fact, I even considered you guys to be German, one of us, from your external appearance when I looked upon you. Now, the issue you're going to have with this, guys, is that would mean that the people who they're portraying now as being Jews, who are quote unquote white, they're claiming that are essentially white, and they're saying, oh, you don't understand, it's complex. They're being very deceptive, because when they say, no, Hitler saw us as an inferior race, they're being very tricky. He didn't see them he saw them as inferior, but he didn't see you as an inferior race, like, oh, you're just a distinct race that happens to be white. No, he saw you as a group of people who, over the centuries, appeared to be white, because actually he considered you to be a what? Mixed race. So when people try to say this thing, oh, the Jews are a race. No. The Jews were, he thought, a mixed race, meaning Jews are multiracial. They're multiracial. They're mixed. They're mixed race. They're multiracial. That means more than one race mixed together. And at the point where they got to Germany, he said that was over centuries that they were able to pass as Germans because they looked white, but actually they were much darker than that because it took centuries for that to happen. And he said they were a mixed race. So he's saying they're obviously mixing with people who are closer to what? White. And that's why they're starting to appear white. But that took centuries to happen. Now, it doesn't take centuries to happen if you're relatively the same shade of skin. And we can't pretend this is not about what they look like, because he said the external appearance, I looked upon them. And guys, this is highly, highly, highly problematic. Because if anyone says you're being anti-Semitic, you say, well, I'm not anti-Semitic. I believe it's okay to be mixed race. But then you got to ask yourself, then when people say the natural Jews, now we got to take this from another standpoint. Now, the argument is people are saying, well, Jew is both a faith and a quote unquote race. That's what they're saying. They're saying it's a faith and a race. Okay, it's a faith. Let's go with this narrative. It's a faith. Okay, you can believe it or choose not to believe it. But when you say it's a race, no, you say it's a faith and a what? And a mixed race. Jews are both a faith and a mixed race. Now, say they want to say, well, no, that's not what the original Jews were. So they're going to say, well, what do the original Jews look like? Okay, let's go look at what Hitler wrote. If you're gonna play this card, if you're gonna start saying it's a race, here's your issue. If you're gonna say, well, okay, it's a faith, but yeah, okay, they were a mixed race. Well, what quote unquote race were they? Because based on external appearance, it took years, it took centuries to start looking European. It took years to start looking white. It took centuries to start looking white. So that means the original quote unquote race, before they got mixed, were dark, because it took centuries for them to start looking European and even German. So even based on the narrative, if I take this even from a carnal perspective, even if I take it from a worldly and carnal perspective, and I say, you know what, forget the quote unquote Bible. I'm just going to say, look, you know what? I'm just going to read Mein Kampf, and I'm going to go based on the documents that are provided me. I don't want to be spread misinformation. The whole thing is problematic. That would mean that they should be gathering people in the land who are either mixed race or much darker than Europeans. Because you got to say, how long does it take? If you were to mix for 200 years at least, if you were to unmix the races that they mixed with, what would you be left with? What is Hitler talking about? That they external appearance had become. Had become meaning there was a time when their external appearance were not like Europeans, right? And according to him, they were not human. But he says had become over centuries. That's at least 200 years. It could be 300 years. It could be 4. It could be many, many years. But he's saying basically over that time, you had become, you started to appear. When I looked upon you, started to look white, and I thought you could be part of my white power nation. But I come to find out that that's just because you were mixing in with Europeans, and now you're looking that. But I subscribe to the one drop rule. You still have that blood mixture. You still have that in you. That's what Hitler was saying, guys. So I just want you to understand, like, just thinking about it from a carnal perspective, it does not work. If you want to sort of say, now, if you go to people like Renee Rowland, go to people like all these people who are quote saying, oh, you know, God has a chosen people, and they're like, there was a chosen race, like they changed it in the Bible, they changed it in Peter instead of chosen generation, because they don't say it's not about being regenerated, because there's a natural Jew and there's a spiritual converted person, and that's the religion, and then one's the group that's a race. So you say, okay, well, if you're saying there's a natural group, then that would mean they would not look European, because that only happened over the centuries that they start to look that way. Over the centuries. So how long does it take? With 200 years to look European? That means they must have been pretty dark if it took 200 years to start looking European. Doesn't work, right? So then you say, okay, now let's talk about who should be in the land, who should be gathered in the land. How do you like it now? Are you still saying they're God's chosen mixed race? Are you still okay with that? Are you now? I want to see all you people who are. I want you to send this to Renee Rowland. I want you to send this to all these people who send it to Mike. Call into Mike Brown, to the Mike Brown show. Tell them you actually read Mein Kampf. You have the references, page 414 and page 67. I want you to reach out to some soul people you know. I want you to go and talk to your person who says, oh, they're of the Jewish race, and then you're going to say, well, let me show you some documents. And so when they start saying, well, look at that so-called person over there who's dark, and they start saying that person doesn't have Jewish parents, you say, how so? Because according to, you don't want to deny the Holocaust, right? And because so you don't want to deny the Holocaust. So to not deny the Holocaust, we have to look at why Hitler did what he did. And the reason he did what he did is because he was denying your mixed race heritage. He was denying that you guys were a lot darker in the past. And we don't want to be racist. But you guys, I'm not saying you're not Jew, but you guys were a lot darker in the past. And that's why he did it. He's like saying, you guys are trying to pretend to be part of the white power structure. And he said, no, you can't be part of the white power structure because, you guys had only started over centuries. The original, quote unquote, chosen people, or if you want to say chosen race, they were actually a lot darker. So only over 200 years that happened, that you start to look European, and he said he even thought you guys were Jews. That explains why they have to put the star on you. It's kind of like that racist America thing, that one drop rule, right? So this changes the whole meaning of anti-Semitic, doesn't it? Anti-Semitic just means you're anti-multiracial. And if it's multiracial, then that means it's okay if you're white. It's okay if you're black. Multiracial. And to deny the Holocaust now, and to deny, to be anti-Semitic and to deny Zionism, is to deny that people who don't look like Europeans would not be able to go in there. People should be saying, no, we want to get back. Hitler was doing this because he thought that the people had changed to be white over time, and they start to look like Europeans. So we want to go ahead and get the original people back in. Let's go back 200 years before their external appearance had become European and started to look in German. So that means they'd be a lot darker. And let's see how the funding works, guys. Let's see how the money goes. Let's see how the church goes. Let's see if people go. Now we're going to go back and let's go talk to the Black Hebrew Israelites. See what's going on, guys. Because everyone was telling me it's not a racial thing. It doesn't matter what color. I'm not a racist. Blah, blah, blah. So, hey, mixed lives matter. Racially mixed lives matter, right? So we're not hating on the fact that they're mixed. We're not upset that they started to get lighter over time because they mixed with Europeans. That's not something to be upset about. I mean, okay, they were originally dark people, and now they mixed with Europeans, and they have become light. Even had Hitler fooled. He was like, I can't even tell. Put a yellow star on these people. So if he hated the Jews who got lighter over 200 years, imagine how much he would have hated what he would consider to be the original Jews. If he hated the Jews even after centuries of them race mixing with Europeans and starting to look like Europeans, so much so that he can't tell. If he hated those, how much must he have hated what he considered to be the original Jews? Undoing the 200 years of race mixing in Europe, how much must he have hated them? And so I want you to reach out to all the Christians. I want you to reach out to all the Zionists. I want you to reach out to all the dispensationalists and tell them, don't start playing these games with us now. Because remember, Moses had an Ethiopian wife. So we know there's some quote unquote race mixing. Since you believe in race, there's some race mixing. The Ethiopian wife. And tell them, hey, now I think I figured out the deal with Jacob and Esau. If they were the same race, it makes sense. I mean, if they were both mixed race, it makes sense. Because if they're both mixed race, what must have been the difference? Must have been faith. Either way, it must have been faith. If they were the same race, quote unquote, if you believe in race, if Jacob and Esau were the same race, had same mother, same dad, it must have been faith. It must have been the difference. But if they were mixed race, it must have been faith also that made the difference. God must not have had any problem, because when Moses married an Ethiopian woman, it wasn't, God didn't trip over it. God wasn't like, oh, what are you doing here? They came out of Egypt with a mixed multitude. You can look up on the internet the 4,400 year open tomb, and the skin of those people is pretty brown. They're not selectively opening the tombs after Egypt got conquered later down the line and saying, oh, this is what Egyptians look like, looking for much lighter skin. No, they're opening a tomb that's 4,400 years open, and you look at it, and those people are brown. They're a darker brown. In the picture, they have a tan, dark brown. Then some other Egyptians, they have in that very same tomb, they have some people who are darker brown. I mean, darker brown, like a really dark brown. Then they have like a medium, quote, dark brown. And then they have some that are like a tan, like a light tan dark brown, like a light tan brown. So it's not like the Egyptians are using that. See, because a lot of people try to use this thing, oh, those colors are symbolic, those don't really mean blah, blah. Well, that's not the case in this one, because you can tell they have people of different skin within the very same tomb on the very same picture. So you got Egyptians looking fairly dark. You got a Ethiopian woman. You got Moses being able to pass for an Egyptian. You got in the Bible, you're talking about his father was Syrian, and then you have Hitler writing about being married with Arabs and Syrians. He's saying they're multiracial. We know they're in Egypt, and then you keep hearing about these people who these Jews, they say from Nigeria, the Igbo tribe, right? You keep hearing about the Igbo tribe, and you keep hearing about the ones in like all these different places. Even in India, you hear about it. In fact, if you read in Esther, it talks about how in 120 something provinces, many people in the land became Jews in one day. That sounds like a conversion. That seems like more of a faith thing, but that was in India. But while they were in India for all that time, probably mixed race. They probably did some race mixing. And so this is what Hitler was upset about, guys. There's all this, the Jews were a darker people who external appearance over the centuries have become lighter over time, and so light that he couldn't really tell from the exterior. They actually looked like white Germans. And so he's like, even though you look white, I'm going to put this star on you and mark you out. So all the stuff that they're doing for Zionism, they should actually be doing that. If they're really sincere, then they should be like, actually, let's go. This is a result of the race mixing. If we're going to go back to the Jews, so if you're going to say Jews are a chosen race, are you going to deny? See, if they're a chosen race, and Hitler's saying that they mixed with Europeans. If they're a chosen race and they mixed with Europeans, then what was the original race if it took 200 years of mixing to look like Europeans? That's a lot of, you got to be fairly dark for it to take 200 years to start looking like Europeans. So what would be the original race if you're going to go that route? See, this stuff backfires. But see, this exposes man's illogic. It exposes God's exposing them their respect to person, their illogic. He's exposing the wickedness of man's heart. He's exposing the whole scheme for what it is. It's basically seems to be a colonization scheme, and it seems like people were willing to sacrifice other people to actually try to support white supremacy under the guise of fighting white supremacy. And they're trying to pull an okadoke and say, "Oh, don't worry. Even though their skin looks white, they're a race," and then they're leaving off the fact that no, it says Hitler said they are a mixed race. When you hear Dr. Brown and you hear the people on The View, you hear people on the news, and they're saying, "Oh no, the Jewish race," and then you say, "Well, what race are they?" And they're like, "Well, you don't understand. It's more complicated." No, it says in Mein Kampf, if you read it, it's a mixed race. who in Hitler's contemporary times said that race had become, external appearance became European looking over time. But before that, 200 years before, what are you saying they look like? Because Hitler is saying they must have been darker than that. Much darker, given that was 200 years. So people want to be racist, and it backfires, guys. So please share this with Renee Rowland. Share this with people who share this with a person who your friends who says they're Jew, and maybe they'll understand that it must be a faith, because they'll be like, oh, this doesn't make sense. It must be a faith, right? It can't. If it's a race, then what good is that? They're saying that external appearance over time became like Europeans, and there's a lot of people who look Europeans, right? So nobody's hating on the fact that no, I'm not hating on people who are mixed race. Hitler's hating on people who are mixed race. I'm not, quote, anti-Semitic. I'm okay with people being mixed race. So don't be anti-Semitic. But when you're talking about don't be anti-Semitic, you have to tell your friends who are Zionists too not to be anti-Semitic. You say, look, don't be racist in your Zionist endeavors. In your Zionist endeavors, don't be racist in your Zionist endeavors. If God's chosen people are mixed race, and we're giving you some leeway to say they're a mixed race, right? Because he's saying that it was over 200 years that they started to look European. So if you're going to say his people are mixed race, what was the race before they mixed? What did they look like before the 200 years of mixing? What did the chosen race look like, according to the new modern Bible versions, look like before the 200 years of mixing, when Hitler said, no, they did not look European back then, and they did not look human? So what group do you think if he's saying they didn't look European and they didn't look human, what group do you think he's talking about? Because he said, no, they look German. So now you know whatever characteristics you're saying, he's not saying he said their external appearance became European. He's in what he's saying when he says their external appearance became European, he's saying to him before they did not look human. They did not look European. That's a big, broad brush. So he's saying before they did not look European, and they did not even look human to him. That means they must have looked very different from every European that Hitler knew. So what was that? What is the polar opposite of looking European to him? What is the exact polar opposite of looking European? Because that's what he's saying. He said become European and inhuman. So that's a vast contrast. That's a vast contrast. See, Hitler kind of messed up when he said this, because in a way he's trying to support white supremacy, but he indirectly is basically saying that the chosen race does not look European, and they do not look white, and they do not look German. Because he used German as a subset of European, and he used European to be associated with human, and he used European and German to be associated with white. So he says they did not look white, and they did not look European, and he says they look very different, because I don't consider them to look like us, so they're not human. So that means the contrast of what they look like must have been vastly different than what they look like today. Now, I want you to take this, go to Renee, Edward P.F., Mark, that one guy, go to all the people who you know who are teaching Zionism, all the people who say, oh, the Jews are a race and they're a chosen race, and I want you to take it and use their own logic on them, use their own logic against them, and see how they feel, and then just watch how they say, now it's a spiritual thing. Oh, brother, it's a faith, brother. Oh, brother, it's a faith, brother. It's a faith, brother. See right here, brother, it says if you be a faith, then are you the children of Abraham, brother. Brother, I don't believe in this racism thing, bruh. Oh, well, are you trying to deny? What do you mean? Then you turn it around on them and say, what are you talking about, brother? Wait a minute now. It's both a race and a faith. Don't you? We want to get to the truth, right? Why are you being anti-Semitic? You don't want to support Hitler, right? You don't want to deny the people, because if you want to support Hitler, then you're going to try to get the ones that look like Hitler, the ones who look European and German. So whoever we get to go back into the promised land, they cannot look European. Their external appearance cannot look European. This is Hitler's words, guys. This is not my words. But since they're using it like this, then let's stick to what according to them, we don't to not be a Nazi, to not be an anti-Semite means we'd have to find people who do not look European. External appearance cannot look European, and when you look up on them, they cannot be German. Specifically, not German and not European. Those are the people who should be considered the chosen race, if we want to go ahead and say it's a race. Not the people who he mixed with, not the Europeans who they mix with. See, I don't have to even use the Bible to disprove this. I'm using Mein Kampf, and I'm using 2 pages. All right, I'm going to let it go at that. Praise my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, King, Lord of Lords. Amen.